Hello, it's my pleasure to welcome Cat Webb, aka Claire North.
Hello.
Okay, so Cat is quite a prolific author. You have written multiple novels across various different genres. A lot of viewers on my channel will probably be familiar with the first 15 Lives of Harry August. You might be familiar with the Songs of Penelope historical fantasy trilogy, which I haven't read yet, but
Boo! As long as you bought it. As long as you've got copies on your shelf and have given copies to your friends, I don't mind.
I loved Harry August, by the way.
Thank you.
And the recently released space opera Slow Gods, which I read just last month. So we'll talk a little bit about Slow Gods, but before we get into that, Kat, firstly, thank you so much for sparing some time for me today.
Thank you.
Could you tell us a little bit about how you became a writer and how you got into writing science fiction and fantasy?
Gotcha. So I was an only child who liked libraries, can you tell? And it turned out I was autistic, can you tell? And so as a kid growing up, I didn't have much in the way of like a social life. Also because the secondary school I went to was on the other side of the city. And so my social life was working down the Barbican Library's fantasy shelf from Asimov to Zelazny. And I wish I'd started the other way because God, Zelazny is good. So I spent a lot of time reading books. And there comes a point, I think, in a lot of young nerds' minds where you go, well, I've read that now. What am I going to do? Maybe I should write one. And obviously the result is bad. It's always bad. Never do that. Bad. But that I didn't know that at the time, so I started writing. I was also very lucky that my dad was a huge science fiction nerd, and I think when I was 10 or 11, he gave me a copy of The Colour of Magic, and I became a Terry Pratchett fan forever, and science fiction was not just accepted, but beloved in my household. So, sat down, age 14, actually sat down before 14, wrote truly bad trash, got to the age of 14, wrote a book, gave it to my folks, and again, another way in which I was very lucky is that my dad had been a publisher. My mum had been a copy editor, and so they're both able to read the book and go, it's not as bad as we expect. Here's the name of a lovely literary agent who will at least give you a polite rejection letter and some feedback. And the intention never really was to become an author with a capital A. I just really liked writing books. But by some miraculous chance, I wrote a book, sent it to the agent. The agent didn't send a rejection letter. She was like, this is less bad than we all expect it to be. Sent it to a publisher, and I've been with the same agent and same publisher ever since.
So you got that book published at 14?
Yeah.
That's quite impressive.
It's unusual. I've had a lot of opportunities. Again, I think there's always that thing where, if I wrote a book age 14, it's because I was in a very safe and loving household that enabled it to be okay, actually.
Okay. And what was the title of that book?
That was Mirror Dreams, about which I can remember nothing.
Okay. I'm wondering, at the time, how were the publishers kind of promoting it? Did they make a big thing about you being such a young author?
They did. Until I was aged 18, I was educational and inspirational. That's the two big letters that you are when you're a young author. But they were also, I think, quite sensitive and careful. One of the first things they kind of asked is, do you think you're capable of doing this ever again? Which I think is a very valid question from a publishing house. And I think I was also lucky in that at least one of my editors turned out to have worked for my dad. And so was mildly scared of my dad in a nice way. My dad wasn't a terrifying man, but he knew his stuff. And so I think they managed to strike quite a good balance with my parents between, on the one hand, yes, it's a proper professional job and we're going to promote it. And, for a little while, you're going to be a teen sensation. But at the same time, it was always made clear, do your GCSEs, get your A-levels. I think they did a balance well of not putting too much pressure on and just kind of letting me have a nice time. And I turned 18 and suddenly I was old.
Okay. So you've mentioned Terry Pratchett. You've mentioned Roger Zelazny. Are there any other sort of favourite authors growing up?
I have a much-thumbed copy of The Wizard of Earthsea because Ursula Le Guin, what a hero. I have a lot of The Dragon Riders of Pern still on my shelf, and McCaffrey from back in the day, which, as we know, stopped at all the Weirs of Pern, and there's nothing else to say about that. I've got on my shelf? I've got some Douglas Adams. My dad had been Douglas Adams' publisher, so there was kind of a strong family connection there. What else did I grow up with that I just remember kind of hugging as a book? There were a lot of female writers who at the time I didn't really appreciate, and take what you will for their works, but actually I think the trails they blazed and the example they set to a young girl writing books are important. I read a lot of kind of Tamora Pierce and Diane Duane, and kind of writers who I think you can look at their work and say, well, there's aspects of the time, but the importance I think they had on my brain in terms of being like, oh, look, there's more than just blokes going into Forbidden Planet was quite important. I loved Neil Gaiman's Sandman, and now I'm stuck with the rest of the world wondering what to do with that. I don't have an answer that won't take 5 hours of philosophical debate. So, the shelf of the early noughties.
Yeah, I was a big Neil Gaiman fan growing up, and now I'm left in quite an awkward position.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I'm never going to buy anything he writes ever again. I do have works of his still on the shelf. I think he did have a huge impact on our culture, but fundamentally, he's an abuser. There's no real getting round that. Seems to be the case. And I think the entire literary industry is now looking at itself going, we don't know what to do with that. But it's a question as old as time, isn't it? Like, you look at so many of the classic writers, your Charles Dickens and your Thomas Hardys, and the second you delve too deep, you're like, oh, Dickens, are you really saving those prostitutes? Is that what we're doing today? My dude, my man, should we talk? This, however, is a dangerous rabbit hole.
Yeah. I think maybe I approach things slightly differently for a long dead author. I feel once we're sufficiently removed in time from their lifetime, we can perhaps appreciate that work in a different way than a current author.
Yeah, a lot of authors are the product of their time, as indeed I will be in 100 years, and people will look back and laugh. But I think the universal question still remains of to what extent can you separate an author and their work? But that's not, I hope, dear God, the question we're here for today, because I don't know.
No. So, alongside your writing, I believe you are also a professional lighting designer.
I am.
And is this a career that you've maintained alongside your writing throughout your life?
Yeah, so aged 18, it was made very clear that university was what you had to do, and my parents were like, good, be a dentist, be a lawyer, be a plumber, get a proper job. You can't rely on writing, you need a real job. So I went to LSE and did international history, which I adored, but doesn't necessarily lead to a real job. I mean, it can do, but it can lead to real full-time jobs that are quite demanding. And I still wanted to write books. So then I went to RADA, the Royal Academy of Dramatic Arts, known as RADIDA, to certainly my year of technical students, the Slytherin of drama schools. And I did technical theatre and stage management and specialised in lighting on the basis that technical work is quite unreliable. There's ebbs and flows. There's a lot here and then not so much and stuff. And I figured that would work quite well with my life. Two equally unreliable jobs, as writing and lighting are, should combine sweetly into one perfect blossoming career. So I did lighting and then went off in to do theatre design. And theatre design was, on the one hand, it was a swing between the divine and the traumatic. Like, theatre, when it works, is incredibly uplifting and you feel your heart sing. And if you get the lighting right for the right moment, you're like, yes, damn, made something beautiful and uplifting and when it just perfectly comes together. But a lot of the time, it's also incredibly underpaid and quite abusive. And after a while, I realised that it was just, I was spending so much of my time working in an industry that was eating me alive. when I could just be at home writing novels. So I moved slightly sideways into live music, which has many of the problems of theatre, but tends only to be toxic for 60 seconds for one day at a time.
Okay. And alongside your back catalogue of published books, you've written under Kate Griffin, I believe, and Claire North, and Catherine Webb.
Yep.
You've probably been asked this question many times, but why the multiple pen names?
Catherine Webb is me, the real me, the whole article, so it made sense to be first published as that. Kate Griffin happened when I started writing adult fantasy, which doesn't mean porn. I know it can sound like porn. It's not vampire porn. It was just fantasy with swearing and violence in it. And the point of that pseudonym was it was an open pseudonym. So it was still definitely me, but it was making a distinction between my previous work and my current work, almost like a child PG certificate on it. And it was also chosen because back in the days when we had bookshops rather than Amazon, and they were big and beloved, and we had lots of indie wonderful stores everywhere, Catherine Webb as a surname got you filed next to Star Trek spin-offs and indeed vampire porn. And they were like, have you considered having a letter in the middle of the alphabet? Just at eye height, just so you walk in, it's like, oh, there, I wonder what that is at exactly my eye line. So Kate Griffin emerged as a pseudonym, and I did that for 6 books. And towards the end of that, I sidestepped into Claire North, who is my most pretentious pseudonym, but also my most successful. So something's going right there. It was supposed to be a closed pseudonym. It was supposed to be secret. And for 2 glorious weeks, everyone thought I was David Mitchell. And I was there for it. It was a lovely experience. But then the BBC got interested in Harry August and asked to do an interview. And so that plan fell apart immediately after 2 weeks. But yeah, same basic principle. This time it was an effort to, not to put too fine a point on it, to kind of sidestep some of the genre snobbery we still have in this country. Claire North is, I think, science fiction and fantasy, but a lot of the time it's marketed as speculative fiction, which means you can put it on the big literary shelves next to your David Mitchell, because as we all know, Cloud Atlas is not a work of science fiction at all. It's just a little imaginative jaunt, as indeed is The Handmaid's Tale and all the other wonderful science fiction books filed as literature. But anyway, leaving that gripe aside, it was an effort to be slightly more speculative fiction-y rather than wizards. And also, N, fantastic letter of the alphabet. Your eye drifts along the shelf and it's right there. It's at a cracking height. It's right next to Murakami, who's also definitely not writing science fiction and fantasy.
Yeah, I never thought of that, like a strategic positioning within the alphabet.
It is less relevant now that there's a monopolistic power controlling a lot of the market, but I still quite like the name.
And I suppose Kate Griffin, sorry to go back to Neil Gaiman again, but that would have put you next to him, wouldn't it?
Yep, as was the fashion of the time. I should say there's another Kate Griffin out there who is a real Kate Griffin who's written the excellent book Findside and the Kitty Peck Mysteries. That's not me. Go check out her work separately.
Okay, good to know. So I believe that, unless I'm mistaken, Slow Gods is your first foray into space opera. Is that right?
Yes, I believe it is.
What made you decide to do that? Because that's quite a big departure from other subgenres that you've written in.
I think a couple of things. Firstly, one of the many blessings of the Claire North name is that I have flip-flopped around quite a lot. The only real consistency across the Claire North vibe is that there'll be ennui and occasional bits of politics disguised as adventure and story. But it's flexible enough that I can still dance around all over the shop, which is a real blessing. I've just finished a trilogy of Greek books, The Song of Penelope, and I had a wonderful time writing that. It was a blast. It was lots of fun. Pirates and sandals in the age of Odysseus. What does a bunch of women do when there's no men around to run the island? Well, they have to run it themselves and fight off the pirates and do the work. And it was great fun. But it had also been 3 books of Mycenaean Greece, of the sandals, of the flip-flops. And I was ready for something different. And I've been out doing kind of quite a lot of events with Greek retellers, some of whom are phenomenally talented, like the depth of research that Jennifer Saint does, like the intelligence of Laura Shepperson. There's so many good ones out there. But also, I was becoming aware that I had been in the last 12 months sent probably 5 different versions of Clytemnestra to blurb for, and probably 3 Medeas. I was beginning to think this is actually feeling quite suffocating now. What is the opposite of this genre? What is the complete opposite of ancient classical womb trauma? It's space opera, pew pew. So really, that was kind of it. I was just like, I need the opposite of this. I need to go and do something I've never done before. And I like doing things I've never done before. I don't know if I do them well, but I think if you don't mess things up and bimble on and do something new, you'll probably stagnate and die. Or become enormously successful for that one series that keeps on going forever, which is also a dream in a way. But I don't think I could pull it off.
Well, I'm thinking, like, when Adrian Tchaikovsky published Children of Time, I believe that was his first venture into science fiction, because he just wrote, unless I'm mistaken, he wrote fantasy up until that point. Yep. And that became his kind of, well, you could say his magnum opus, but he's written so much. But maybe something similar will happen to you.
I mean, we all fantasize about being as prolific and indeed as brilliant as Adrian Tchaikovsky. And all you need to do is just write 3 books a year, each one of which is dazzlingly brilliant, full of humanity and chock full of original ideas, and you can do it. It's just that simple. Just do an effortless, brilliant, mind-blowing Adrian Tchaikovsky, and you'll be fine. It's easy, isn't it? It's fine.
I mean, he did say, because he's on the cover of Slow Gods, and he says, astonishing and thought-provoking. So
I'm hugely grateful to him. Yeah. I read Children of Time and was like, nothing will ever surpass this. And I'm aware that I very much doubt anything I do will ever really compare. I think it's at such a high bar for space opera that many people have struggled to reach and simply not. But all of his stuff is so good. Isn't it just nauseating how damn good he is?
Well, personally, I think you have already set an extremely high bar. Not that I've read a huge amount of your work, but with Harry August, I don't think it's an exaggeration to say that's one of my all-time favorite books, especially within time travel. A few years back, I made a list of my top 15 favorite science fiction books, and that was one of them.
Thank you.
But anyway, let's go back to Slow Gods. So, how would you describe it for the uninitiated? What is Slow Gods about?
The plot aspect is a binary star system is definitely going to go supernova. And being a binary star, you know when it's going to happen. You can look at it, you can do the maths, you can say, okay, we've got 100 years until this system goes boom. And you can also then do the follow-up maths. You can go, right, it's going to go boom in 100 years, then a shockwave of the size of X is going to ripple out through the nearby space. Everything within about 80 light years of that shockwave will be destroyed. Oh no, that includes a lot of civilized planets. And then the question becomes, okay, you know that, what do you do? What do these different worlds do facing absolute guaranteed extermination, and not just guaranteed, on a very precise clock extermination? You know to the minute how long you have before your planet is wiped from existence. What do? And I think it's not a spoiler to say that that's page 1 of the book, and things go downhill from there.
Right. And would it be fair to say that there's quite a lot of allegory on like real world issues going on here?
Yeah, it is not a nuanced book. I hate to say that because I was always taught, put the story first and don't be a didactic pillock. And I hope I have put the story first. I'm not being too didactically a pillock. But if you think that this is a not very subtle metaphor for climate change, well, it is. And it's also there's some other stuff going there. It's the first book I wrote that wasn't kind of part of an already contracted series that I wrote after my autism diagnosis. And there's a lot of poking at alienness and otherness there, which on the one hand I was cautious about because I don't particularly want to tangle up neurodiversity with the concept of alien otherness because it's just human. It's just human otherness. But on the other hand, it provides an interesting canvas to poke at these ideas in that slightly richer and more narrative way that science fiction allows. So yeah, subtle, Not so much, but hopefully still fun.
Oh, I think so. Which brings you to the central character, Moore, spelled M-A-W.
Mm-hmm.
He does have a longer name, which I'm not sure I can pronounce. But
I'm not sure I can either. I can spell it, but I can't pronounce it. For that, I recommend the audiobook read by the wonderful Peter Kenny.
Okay. Can you describe the character of Moore? Because it is quite a character-focused novel.
Yes. So Moore is born in a series of worlds known as the Shine, which is kind of hyper-capitalist to the most toxic and dysfunctional extent it possibly can be, and gets caught up in events entirely beyond his control. He's a complete nobody, really, just captured in things that are not his problem. And there is an accident on a spaceship, as sometimes these things go. And again, I don't think it's a huge spoiler, because it happens quite early on, to say that it's almost certain that Moore died in that accident, and yet there he stands, perfectly alive and well, but altered. And again, the nature of the alteration is very, very hard for people to put their fingers on. He passes the DNA tests, he passes the blood tests. He's definitely himself. He has, ostensibly, his memories as far as we can tell. But there is something categorically off about this person, and people find his very existence uncomfortable, but also useful. And so he kind of goes from being a bystander in cosmic events to being somewhat involved, again, slightly despite himself, just because his peculiarities, the fear that he provoke, as well as the things they can do, are of service to much, much bigger and much longer plans than anything he can comprehend.
Right. And he is essentially a space pilot, if that's the right term.
Yeah, I think
Yeah.
that's fair to sum it up. Space travel is still phenomenally dangerous in this universe, and he has a knack for it, which again veers on the uncanny and makes people quite uncomfortable.
Right. And again, without sort of going too much into spoilers or anything, but I think a key part of the world building is the way people travel faster than light in this universe. Can you say anything about that?
You have a choice to make when you write science fiction. You have two choices, essentially. Option one, you can't go faster than light. And if you can't go faster than light, then almost by definition, you're writing a book in which someone gets on a spaceship, wakes up 40 years later, and realizes everyone they've ever known and loved is dead. And it becomes this epic thousands of years voyage, and it's full of existential angst and darkness and grief and despair as you cross very slowly in unimaginable darkness and then arrive having experienced the events of Interstellar. Or, better example, Children of Time, which actually does it well. But a lot of the time, not going faster than light means so much ennui, more ennui than even I can handle. And it can be beautiful, and it can be a powerful way to look at the human spirit and grief and fastness and scale and what we're willing to sacrifice, but it can also be miserable. Or you've got the other option, which is Star Wars. You can go faster than light. You can do the Kessel Run in however many parsecs it was, that classic geography joke. And as a result, you get an international melting pot, essentially. You can have planets and cultures and species slamming together in this great big messy void, and it becomes loud and busy and hot. You have room for war that will only take a few weeks instead of take 500 years for the missile to be shot and then the missile to cross space and then for the missile to land. You can do a great deal of high intensity, but at the same time, if you make fast and light travel too easy and don't explain it, you start to cross that line between science fiction and magic. And a lot of science fiction writers, I think, sit on that line between science fiction and magic. They always use magical qualities to do their fast and light. And I've kind of made the same choice. It's fast and light travel. It basically is magic, but it is magic that comes with a very heavy price if you use it too long. And it's magic that implies that there is other stuff out there about which we don't know very much. But its driving quality, whatever the it is that's out there, is not that it's malicious or evil or cruel. It's just gently curious.
Right. And so we come up with the concept of arc space.
Yeah. Which is science fiction woo-woo magic, but curious science fiction woo-woo magic.
Yeah. And another thing which I found quite interesting about the way the story is narrated, we've got a wide variety of characters, both human and non-human, and we've got several different pronouns, including neopronouns specific to, for example, artificial intelligences. So, um, I'm I'm curious, what was your reasoning for introducing various different neopronouns into the text?
Because gender's a construct, man. Um, which sounds glib, but actually there is more depth to it than that. Um, Gender fundamentally is a construct. We live in a world where to care this deeply about gender, to care whether he's a he or she is a he, is fundamentally boiled down more and more to caring about other people's genitals. Because the performance of masculine and the performance of feminine is so broad and so blurry and so flexible and open to individual interpretation that if you're really hyperfixated on he or she as a concept, at this point, you're not caring about cultural representation, you're caring about people's willies. And I think that if we're in a far future of space travel, we should be over that. We should just be less interested in the genitals. There's other stuff going on in people. Let's get over it. And so, with that logic, caring about gender as genitals seems tedious, dull, and quite narrow-minded, and caring about gender more as a shared cultural story is much more interesting, and I think would reflect diversity in an intergalactic experience better. So there's a lot of gender pronouns that are reflective of the culture from which a person comes. It says a lot about the stories that culture likes to tell about the people who live in it. And then there are pronouns for the machines, because they don't have genitals. Why would they care about he or she? But they don't want to be called it, because toasters. And again, that is just it's part of the cultural story of who the sentient machines think they are, and kind of how they want to fit into the universe. And it was a lot of fun writing the various different artificial intelligences, because if you think about cognition for more than 2 seconds, you know, you can have a really big brain in a moon, but then it has to get power and then it has to process that power. So how much the brain is power processing, and then how much cognition do you have to wipe out to get power processing? Okay, so you get more power, but now you have to vent the heat from your processing. And you just get exponentially bigger as you try to combine energy and thought and essentially matter, what is conceivable. And sooner or later, you're going to reach a hard physical wall. You're going to say there is only so much that a mind can process without being the size of a sun with a sun at its core. So, given that no artificial intelligence can be infinite, artificial intelligences, like human cultures, have to create essentially snappy algorithms to help them think faster. They can't be reinventing every single time they meet something new what they think that new is. It just takes too much cognitive load. So they have to have essentially built a framework by which they interpret the universe. Do they think the universe is fundamentally peaceful? Do they think it's fundamentally dangerous? What is the core one-line bit of code that will then skew their reactions? And it's fascinating doing that, because that almost allows you to break the construction of thought down into little piddly bits and then poke it with a stick.
Yeah.
Again, I should reiterate, there's a story, guys. I know it sounds like I'm talking about neuroscience and climate culture, but there's a story, I promise. Stuff happens.
Oh yeah. Well, there's so much to talk about in this book, even without mentioning the plot. I think, yeah, there's a whole lot going on. And one thing I found quite interesting about the pronouns is it's everything you just said it is, but also to an extent, the pronouns can also reflect social hierarchies and expressions of dominance, right? Because we've got, for example, people within the Shine who are kind of like the ruling elite of this universe, who have they're not just simply he and she, they're he with an accent on. I don't know how you even say that, but which means they, if I'm interpreting this right, they are superior to other beings. Is that right?
Yeah. So I think, again, that's where there's a story, but that in particular is a not very subtle reflection on the fact that when we do perform gender in our society, there is still an expectation of what the perfect man should be and what the perfect woman should be. And that expectation varies wildly from country to country and culture to culture. Even across the USA, for example, you can look at different states and say, well, in this state, the perfect man is sawing a log in half with his face. And in that state, the perfect man is a psychiatrist working for an enormous private company, bringing in $100,000 a month. Like, the expectations of what a man should be and what a woman should be in this state. The woman should be a homekeeper. She should be raising 7 kids and praising Jesus on the regular. And in another state, the woman should be a nurse. She should be a professional. There's a lot of expectation on what men and women should be to achieve the pinnacle of the local expectations. And in the case of The Shine, you can again just logically extract that. You can say, well, here are people performing the ultimate man, the Rolex, but in space, the ultimate woman, the sexiness, but in space. But it's also worth saying that that's not a fixed thing. That is a thing that very explicitly evolves over time with culture, as it has with all of human history. You look back through time, back in the Elizabethan era, the Victorian era, it was so sexy to be a very pale woman who could barely tie her own shoelaces, because it was a sign of elitism. It was a sign that you weren't working in the fields. You were looked after and wealthy. And these days, it's sexy to be tanned and orange. Like, our ideas of what perfection should be and what the ultimate man and woman should be changes every 5 minutes, but we still put a lot of weight on it in our culture.
Very interesting. Yeah. Now, I'm curious. Would you ever want Slow Gods to be adapted into film or television? And do you think an adaptation could do it justice?
Obviously the answer is yes, but not necessarily for good reasons. Who doesn't love being paid? Like, fundamentally, there's always new curtains you need to put up. I've just moved house. It's a real fixer-upper. Guys, buy my stuff. Buy my stuff. So I would love the cash. In terms of what would be made, I am not precious about my work. Again, worst case scenario, something bad is made, and people go, wow, the book was better, wasn't it? And you're like, that's fine by me. And even if something bad is made, you'll still have had exposure and publicity and the money. You'll be like, great, so people can now go and read the book and see the book is better. And if something good is made, odds are it's good not because it's necessarily a microsecond by microsecond exact replication of what you've done. The point about making something is it should still be new. Each person who's part of that team, directors, producers, designers, even actors, I say as a technician who's like, oh God, yes, remember actors happen. They all bring something different and unique to their interpretation of an adaptation. An adaptation shouldn't be slavish. It should reflect the uniqueness of the team that makes it. And it will be better if it does that. It will be better if people are allowed to use their personal creativity to make their own decisions. So I have no interest in slavish adaptations. I think that's not the point. TV and film are two very different mediums, and the stories they tell should be allowed to work within those mediums. And if they want to try and tell my stuff, you go for it, guys.
Okay. But let's say, what if Netflix came up to you and they said, we'd like to turn this into, I don't know, a series. Would you like to be the screenwriter, or should we just leave it up to us? How would you respond?
I've done some screenwriting, and it's interesting, and it's a skill I think I've been improving at, but I'm not yet a master of. I think in the ideal situation, there is some merit in getting someone who is provably good. I am not provably good. It is a different craft. It is not my medium. I would love to follow the tailcoats of someone who is provably good and learn from them. I'd love to be a fly on that wall and understand how they did this. But I don't think there's any merit in saying, oh, we've got the original author writing the script, if it's not my craft. My attitude is always, I'm happy to sit here and answer questions. And I'm happy to say, no, that doesn't make sense. I'm happy to pick holes in anything you want until it does make sense. But it is a craft. People study for years and years and years to get good at that. The swing of that is that TV is quite prone to saying, hello, brilliant screenwriter, you haven't done 10 years writing Casualty yet, so we're not even going to give you a chance. So there was a balance to be struck. But from my perspective, if you want the series to actually be good, maybe hire someone provably good. And I'll sit in the back room and help out if anyone gets stuck on anything.
Oh, sounds good. So we've talked a little bit about some authors already, but I'm curious, since this was your first time sort of entering space opera, were there any other writers or books that have influenced you in the way you approach this story, such as Agent Tchaikovsky or anyone else? Oh.
I mean, I've read a bunch of space operas over my life because I love a space opera. And there was a recent flurry, I think, kind of 5-10 years ago, of some really stonking stuff. Not just Adrian blowing everyone's socks off, but Arcadia Martin is doing some quite interesting things. Anne Leckie did some quite interesting things in between all the scenes of drinking tea. Becky Chambers is doing some really interesting things and is also giving you a hug while doing it. So there's a good wave of really, really excellent space opera writers out there, and I've read their stuff and enjoyed their stuff. But I read it before I decided to write a space opera, just because I enjoy their work and admire their work. There's also kind of the big daddies in the background. There's your Ian M. Bankses and your Peter F. Hamiltons, authors of sprawling, massive books that you can use to hold a house up with. And again, I've read a lot of that and admired it, but that was a long time ago. So there is an awareness of space opera. There is a real respect for those who do it well, because of how hard it is to do well, I think. But there was no deliberate kind of, I must now bone up on this, because I think every author is prone to picking at the things that they enjoy. It's just inevitable. If you enjoy something, it will be in your mind while you work. I think that I want to avoid that where I can, and I'll read the stuff afterwards.
Fair enough. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about Slow Gods. What is next for Claire North? Or Cat Webb, even?
It's another Claire North. I'm still doing a whole round of Claire Norths because they're still willing to pay me for it, which is fantastic. I'm currently editing another time travel book. But unlike Harry August, I would argue this is real, proper time travel instead of just looping round and round in a circle. This is, 6,000 years worth of mystery and murder mystery across the centuries and zipping all over the place through time and space, and giant conspiracies and tears in reality and, fun stuff. Fun, proper, zippy-whippy, timey-wimey, tangly-wangly. The kind of time travel where you get to page 280 and you go, I don't think this makes sense. But it's time travel. It was never going to quite make sense. And it makes sense within the craft and within the story. Like, there's no pushing magic red buttons to solve things. Within the language that's established, it's been made sense. Just don't think about it with a physics hat on too hard, because then you'll get to the inevitable truth that always has to time travel. Every single time travel story ever told is ultimately circular. And again, you have these time travel tropes you have to juggle with. You can go down the, actually, it was you all along, you did kill your father and marry your mother, it was inevitable, you done it, kind of route of inevitability, no free will, etc. You can go the opposite way, you can go, free will is real, Doctor Who is now going to bimble along and change history, and sometimes it's fine and sometimes it's not. Woo, fun! And I've gone more for that route, because again, I just sort of wanted to have fun with it. So yeah, that's out sometime in the future.
Okay, I very much look forward to that one. I love a good time travel yarn.
I hope it's all right. I really enjoyed writing it. That doesn't necessarily mean it's good. Fingers crossed.
Yeah, so I think that's pretty much everything I wanted to ask you. I can't wait to explore more of your work. There's a whole load of your back catalogue which I haven't got around to yet. But for anyone watching this, I can definitely recommend Slow Gods. I think it was a very thoughtful and engaging and exciting space opera. And it's a standalone. Am I right in saying it's a standalone?
It is.
Yes.
Thank
you. So you don't need to commit yourself to, 2,000 pages of action, which can be a bit intimidating.
You feel free to buy everything I've ever written, though. Just casually if you feel like it. No pressure.
So yeah, Kat, thank you very much for your time. I've really enjoyed speaking to you, and good luck with the time travel novel and whatever other projects you're working on.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it.